Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Tens of thousands of anti-abortion activists are gathering in Washington for the 45th annual March for Life. The rally marks the anniversary of the 1973 Supreme Court case Roe versus Wade, which legalized abortion. Well, this is the scene live in the centre of the Washington Capitol. I think we can see it shortly. And also at the White House, Donald Trump is about to become the first ever sitting president to address the rally.
Yes.
Let's speak to our US correspondent, Cordelia Lynch, who's in Washington for us. And Cordelia, President Trump hasn't always held these views, has he?
No, he hasn't. And really, this cements his U-turn on the issue of abortion. In previous interviews, he has supported women's access to abortion. But it reflects the party that he is now the head of, and the transition in some of his political views. Many Republicans are against abortion and support bills that will reduce the funding for those organisations that provide abortion services. I was there last year when Mike Pence addressed the crowd, the vice president. It is something that he feels very strongly about, something that's very much part of his political fabric and a platform that he has campaigned on very staunchly. But Donald Trump has lots more to worry about today beyond this issue, which can be a very galvanizing one, it must be said, for Republicans. I was in Utah this week, and I was speaking to voters there who felt that despite some of the concern about the tenor, the tone, the conduct of the president, the fact that he is anti-abortion, pro-life, is a reason for them to vote. It's a heavily Mormon state there, and across the country, this is an issue that people can unite around the Republican Party on.
Yeah, another big issue for the president at the moment is the impending government shutdown, Cordelia, and that's put paid to his plans to head to Florida for the weekend, hasn't it?
It certainly has. The deadline is midnight tonight, and it's causing chaos, really, here on Capitol Hill. They've been trying to get a funding bill sorted so that the government can continue to function, but unfortunately, the sticking point for Democrats is immigration. They want to see the Republicans come up with a plan whereby those young immigrants, the so-called dreamers here, will be allowed to stay in the U.S., and they are very irked, very angered by some of the remarks and allegations of racism from the president, and they say that if they don't see some kind of movement from him on this, they are not going to support a funding bill. And this is really a test of Donald Trump's leadership, and I think interesting too, because in the past there's been a lot of discussion about the language that Donald Trump uses doesn't have any real-term impact. Well, here it potentially will. That's a theory that the White House do reject, but Donald Trump needs to reach this agreement, and as you say, he's put off his trip to Florida to try and work out a deal. He's bashing the phones, but how much influence he currently wields is very uncertain.
Yeah, and you talked about a test of his leadership. It is a year since President Trump's inauguration. You've been talking to people about how he's fared and how he's viewed a year on, Cordelia.
Every one of you to be part of this movement.
That's right, and I think it's a very interesting time to reflect on Donald Trump's presidency. He has made some legislative waves on the tax overhaul. There is a booming economy that he is seeking to take credit for. Lots of people I spoke to were very enthusiastic about his economic record. They felt that he was pushing through on the issues that they made him president for, on the controversial issues, for instance, of immigration. By and large, the majority of people I spoke to didn't take too kindly to his tweets. They wished he would dial it down and back. I spoke to plenty of Republican congressmen who also expressed their concern about the early morning tweets and the barbs with North Korea. But I think it's easy to express indignation, shock at just how unconventional Donald Trump is. But ultimately, it's very plausible to see another 7 years in office at the moment for Donald Trump.
OK, Cordelia, thank you. And we will return to Washington to hear that speech from President Trump as he addresses the rally.
Thank you very much. That's so nice. Sit, please. We have tens of thousands of people watching us right down the road, tens of thousands. So I congratulate you, and at least we picked a beautiful day. You can't get a more beautiful day. I want to thank our Vice President, Mike Pence, for that wonderful introduction. I also want to thank
President Donald Trump in Washington addressing an anti-abortion rally. Let's listen in.
Karen. Today I'm honored and really proud to be the first president to stand with you here at the White House to address the 45th March for Life. That's very, very special. 45th March for Life. And this is a truly remarkable group. Today, tens of thousands of families, students, and patriots, and really just great citizens gather here in our nation's capital. You come from many backgrounds, many places, but you all come for one beautiful cause: to build a society where life is celebrated, protected, and cherished. The March for Life is a movement born out of love. You love your families, you love your neighbors, you love our nation, and you love every child, born and unborn, because you believe that every life is sacred, that every child is a precious gift from God. We know that life is the greatest miracle of all. We see it in the eyes of every new mother who cradles that wonderful, innocent, and glorious newborn child in her loving arms. I want to thank every person here today and all across our country who works with such big hearts and tireless devotion to make sure that parents have the care and support they need to choose life. Because of you, tens of thousands of Americans have been born and reached their full God-given potential. Because of you. You're living witnesses of this year's March for Life theme, and that theme is Love Saves Lives. As you all know, Roe versus Wade has resulted in some of the most permissive abortion laws anywhere in the world. For example, in the United States, it's one of only 7 countries to allow elective late-term abortions, along with China, North Korea, and others. Right now, in a number of states, the laws allow a baby to be born from his or her mother's womb in the 9th month. It is wrong. It has to change. Americans are more and more pro-life. You see that all the time. In fact, only 12% of Americans support abortion on demand at any time. Under my administration, we will always defend the very first right in the Declaration of Independence, and that is the right to life. Tomorrow will mark exactly 1 year since I took the oath of office. And I will say our country is doing really well. Our economy is perhaps the best it's ever been. You look at the job numbers, you look at the companies pouring back into our country, you look at the stock market at an all-time high, unemployment, 17-year low, unemployment for African-American workers at the lowest mark in the history of our country, unemployment for Hispanic at a record low in history, unemployment for women, think of this, at an 18-year low. We're really proud of what we're doing. And during my first week in office, I reinstated a policy first put in place by President Ronald Reagan, the Mexico City policy. I strongly supported the House of Representatives' pain-capable bill, which would end painful late-term abortions nationwide. And I call upon the Senate to pass this important law and send it to my desk for signing. On the National Day of Prayer, I signed an executive order to protect religious liberty. Very proud of that. Today, I'm announcing that we have just issued a new proposal to protect conscience rights and religious freedoms of doctors, nurses, and other medical professionals. So important. I have also just reversed the previous administration's policy that restricted states' efforts to direct Medicaid funding away from abortion facilities that violate the law. We are protecting the sanctity of life and the family as the foundation of our society. But this movement can only succeed with the heart and the soul and the prayer of the people. Here with us today is Mary Anna Donadio from Greensboro, North Carolina. Where is Mariana? Hello, come on up here, Mariana. Come. Nice to see you, baby. Mariana was 17 when she found out she was pregnant. At first, she felt like she had no place to turn. But when she told her parents, they responded with total love, total affection, total support. Great parents? Great? I thought you were going to say that. I had to be careful. Mariana bravely chose life and soon gave birth to her son. She named him Benedict, which means blessing. Mariana was so grateful for her parents' love and support that she felt called to serve those who were not as fortunate as her. She joined with others in her community to start a maternity home to care for homeless women who were pregnant. It's great. They named it Room at the Inn. Today, Mariana and her husband, Don, are the parents of 6 beautiful children, and her eldest son, Benedict, and her daughter, Maria, join us here today. Where are they? Come on over. That's great. Over the last 15 years, Room at the Inn has provided housing, childcare, counseling, education, and job training to more than 400 women. Even more importantly, it has given them hope. It has shown each woman that she is not forgotten, that she is not alone, and she really now has a whole family of people who will help her succeed. That hope is the true gift of this incredible movement that brings us together today. It is the gift of friendship, the gift of mentorship, and the gift of encouragement, love, and support. Those are beautiful words, and those are beautiful gifts. And most importantly of all, it is the gift of life itself. That is why we march. That is why we pray. And that is why we declare that America's future will be filled with goodness, peace, joy, dignity, and life for every child of God. Thank you to the March for Life. Special, special people, and we are with you all the way. May God bless you, and may God bless America. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Well, let's speak to our US correspondent Cordelia Lynch now in Washington. So President Trump speaking out in support of the March for Life, the largest anti-abortion march in the United States. Cordelia, these aren't views he's always held, though, are they?
No, they certainly aren't. In fact, when he was still a celebrity real estate tycoon in an interview in 1999, he said that he hated abortion and that he was very pro-life. But he said he'd gone on somewhat of a transition when he was running in 2016, saying that he was against abortion, with only some exceptions in the case of rape and incest. So the address there to this large gathering, the largest rally of its kind against abortion in the country, the president was really cementing his stance. It's something that he's pushing for on a policy platform, something dear to his vice president, Mike Pence's heart as well. Americans are roughly split down the middle on the issue of abortion, with 49% in support of it and 46% against it. That was recorded in a recent Gallup poll. But it's certainly a very galvanizing issue for Republicans, and noteworthy at a time when there is plenty of division in the party at the moment.
OK, Cordelia, thank you.
Now, in the United States, the government is lurching towards a financial shutdown unless a last-minute deal can be reached. The chaos on Capitol Hill is perhaps a fitting metaphor for Donald Trump's first year in office, a year which has seen controversy after controversy, some broken promises, but other ones delivered. His approval rating is at an historic low, but the economy is growing strongly and his own supporters remain loyal. Today, he's been out rallying the faithful at an anti-abortion parade. Porrick O'Brien is there.
Kathy, we're at Constitution Avenue at a giant anti-abortion rally. It's interesting talking to the people here in terms of their assessment of the last 12 months of Donald Trump. What's their take on it? These are Bible folk, remember. Their take turned to Matthew chapter 7, verse 16. By their deeds you shall know them, not by their tweets you shall know them. And I say that because the people here say that Donald Trump is delivering for them on what they elected him to do. Robust immigration reform, tax reform, and of course that crucial appointment to the Supreme Court last year. Here's a flavour of sentiment here on the ground.
Tomorrow will mark exactly 1 year since I took the oath of office. And I will say our country is doing really well. Our economy is perhaps the best it's ever been.
What's your assessment of his 12 months in office so far?
I think he's doing a great job. I hope it continues till the second term.
Where have you come from today?
From Long Beach, Long Island.
What's your assessment?
I think he's doing a really good job. I think he's stands up for the country and doing the right thing, and he's pro-life. That's the main thing.
Is that the main thing for you, yeah?
Well, it's one of the main things, yes.
Yeah.
People might be offended by some of his words, but what he does and how the country's doing, he's doing a good job.
We're from Bucyrus, Ohio.
What's your assessment of his 12 months so far?
Yay!
I think he's doing well.
Is that right? Yeah. Why are you so excited about it?
Because he's doing what he said he would do, and he's not backing down to the Democrats.
I see.
He's standing for what he believes, and I think that's really good.
Is there anything that he's done that you do not like?
No, nothing. He walks on water as far as I'm concerned.
He walks on water?
As far as I'm concerned.
So, what of the next 12 months? I think it's worth keeping an eye on two main themes that could end up defining the next 12 months. Number one, I know we've said it before, but the Robert Mueller investigation, and in particular, how that is examining Russian money laundering, alleged Russian money laundering. And the second one I think is interesting is going to be the role of women, particularly in the midterm elections come November. Not just women voters, but there are record numbers of women running for office in that midterms, and that could redefine the political dynamic here. Tomorrow on the streets behind me, the giant women's march will take place. And it's worth noting that this time last year, when that women's march took place here, it was the biggest in US history.
Porrick, thank you very much. Well, joining me now from New York is former economic advisor to Donald Trump, Betsy McCoy. Ms. McCoy, we saw the anti-abortion rally today. It was quite a divisive decision, perhaps, for President Trump to turn up. But, I mean, that's how he's run this presidency. He divided America when he was elected, and those divisions have deepened since, haven't they?
Well, actually, most Americans support Donald Trump's position, although the United States is divided between pro-choice and pro-life advocates roughly equally. Americans are overwhelmingly against partial birth abortion, late-term abortion, inflicting abortion on preborn babies who are capable of feeling pain, and of course killing infants who are born alive despite the efforts at abortion. And he has supported all those legislative efforts to stop those extreme versions of abortion.
Right.
So I think when you see him out there on the street today, he has most Americans behind him.
Okay, but how do you think some of the Christian...
I happen to be a pro-choice woman, but I sympathize with his views on those particular issues.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, how do you think some of the Christian right, who no doubt were at that rally today, how do you think they view a president who's joked about sexually assaulting women, allegations of an affair with a porn star, allegations he denies, but how does the Christian right view that? How do you view that?
Well, most evangelicals and Catholics who voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump kind of wave aside a lot of this as media hype, which it is. The fact is they're looking at what he does, not what the media say about him. And that will explain, for example, their enthusiasm, because although the media say he's not doing a good job, the United States economy is at its absolute all-time peak. The stock market has gone up 40% this year since his election, and that actually makes almost all Americans richer, not just wealthy people, but every union worker, every retiree who depends on a pension is 40% richer now. And when they get their paychecks in February, they will see that the recently enacted tax cut also means more take-home pay for them.
Okay,
so I'm predicting that these midterm elections coming next November will be a big surprise for those who are predicting a Democratic rout.
So why do you think his approval ratings are the lowest in history then for this stage in a presidency?
Well, because the media coverage, which I would categorize as shamefully biased, has influenced public opinion. But now the public, particularly working people to whom he has addressed his campaign from the beginning, working people are feeling the tangible results of his economic policies. And let me put forward another one. The United States wants energy independence. Coal production is up 12% this year. This year, the United States will produce more oil than Saudi Arabia. These are the kinds of tangible accomplishments that will be reflected at the polls next November.
But are you concerned at all on the international stage that he's firing off tweets about the size of Kim Jong-un's nuclear button? He's making the world a more precarious place. Do you worry about that?
I wouldn't say he's making the world a more precarious place. The tweets are unnerving to some people. Those of us who have been in politics a long time kind of ignore all of that background noise. The fact is, he has diminished the ISIS forces in Iraq from 45,000 fighters to 1,000 in a year. That military accomplishment has made a broad swathe of the Middle East much safer, including Christians, by the way.
Betsy McCoy, thank you very much for joining us.
This weekend marks the first anniversary of President Trump's inauguration and the start of what's been a highly controversial first 12 months in office. From day one, Mr. Trump clashed with the press, claiming they'd underreported the size of the crowd. And he's gone on to regularly provoke outrage with his policies and comments on social media. But not everyone feels the same. His core supporters feel more passionate about the president than ever, as our Washington correspondent Robert Moore now reports.
I decided to put it up to honor the one-year anniversary of his inauguration.
With a Trump banner now in her front window.
Isn't that cute?
Joanna DeFranco is the ultimate loyalist.
This is a Trump beer stein.
She has Donald Trump memorabilia throughout her house. Much of it collected on that day a year ago, when she attended the president's inauguration, cheering as Donald Trump became America's 45th president. Today she feels the president has not put a foot wrong, that he understands her very instincts.
Everything he said was spot on about as far as how I feel. I was like, this man is amazing that he knows what I'm thinking.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
We've been talking again to those who travelled down to the inauguration. Very few have buyer's remorse. Alex was also there. With her boss, she runs a pizza restaurant, and they are thrilled with how America is changing.
Absolutely love it. The longer he's president, the more I like him. And I'm proud of him. I'm proud of us as a country.
As a president, he's amazing. As a president, he's absolutely amazing.
America has been deeply divided by this president. You can see it everywhere. A Confederate flag at one house, a resist flag at a neighbour's. But what is saving Trump is that his supporters are not deserting him, whether in small-town Pennsylvania or the suburbs of Virginia.
We thank you that you have given us a great president.
Here we joined a pro-Trump anniversary gathering, where the president is seen as the figure behind a booming economy.
Look at the man. What we see is a man whose heart beats with the American people, who has given up his lifestyle, his billionaire lifestyle, to basically be savaged by the media because he wants to help America.
A short time ago, the president was talking to this loyal base.
Thank you to the March for Life.
1 year on, these activists feel he is delivering, especially on social issues, ensuring this anniversary is almost as divisive as the inauguration was 12 months ago. Robert Moore, ITV News, Washington.
Now, the Trump administration is a year old and never a dull moment. As if to prove that very point, on the eve of his anniversary tonight, his administration looks to be hours away from a government shutdown as it struggles to pass an emergency budget bill. But while the hacks who tried to cover Trump's presidency reel from one tweet or leak-inspired moment to another, sometimes several times in a single day, what has he actually achieved? And how far has he been able to satisfy the voters who sent him to Washington with the mission to make America great again? The language may be coarser and the lines between business and presidential interests blurred, but perhaps the most salient feature of this first year is the degree to which his achievements have rested on going with the grain in Washington rather than draining its swamp.
The President of the United States.
1 year on, and wrangling over budgets has left the federal government on the verge of a close down. It's drama, but it's also business as usual in Washington. Presidents Obama and Clinton face the same crisis, and it's a measure of the power that holding the purse strings gives Congress, whatever Trump might have said on the campaign trail. Where better to escape the pressures of the office than the golf course? A lot of pressure, so a lot of golfing. As for breaking the mould in presidential communications, there's been plenty of that too, often via early morning tweet storms. That hasn't bolstered historically low approval ratings, of course.
The most immediate salient thing to say about Donald Trump's approval rating is that it is historically bad. A lot of people get a honeymoon period. The best that he had was basically breaking even to start off with. His approval ratings have basically been more stable throughout the year than is traditionally something that you'd see, because they didn't really have that much further to sink.
His base does remain solid even if he hasn't built that wall, and the popularity is partly due to roaring economic performance.
Make America great again, and that's what it is. That's what it is. Just make America great. It will. It's gonna be great.
We will make America great again.
He's a good businessman, and that's what the country needs. Is get the country back out of debt, get a lot of people working, and I think that's what he's doing.
It's the economy, stupid. Did you ever hear that one? It's the economy. It is indeed.
He's done something that no other politician has ever done. He's keeping his promises to the people.
And partly due to delivery. on deregulation and tax cuts, the area where right from the outset of his presidency it was clear that the Republican control of Congress would help rather than hinder the president. On Russia, for example, hawkish senators have made it impossible for Trump to improve relations with the Kremlin, with sanctions staying in place and the US going further in arming the Ukrainians than Barack Obama did. And when it comes to military or intelligence matters, the spooks have also pushed back on Russia policy, and the Pentagon has largely written its own rules for escalating counter-terrorist operations.
In reality, his policy is actually not particularly radical. His policies don't really reflect the rhetoric that you see on his Twitter account. In fact, we've seen a considerable amount of continuity from the Obama administration.
So while the president's people might point to wins on the tax code or deregulation, what's really notable is how far things have stayed the same, despite the campaign promises to drain the swamp or radically change the way power is bargained inside the Beltway. So how do things look from America, and what can we expect for the next 3 years of Trump's presidency? Joining us from Boston is former New York Times executive editor Jill Abramson. In Miami is Matthew Oberle from the Young Republican National Federation. And then we'll speak in a moment also to Wendy Osefo, a political commentator who worked on the Obama administration's anti-poverty program. Jill Abramson, can I start with you? Do you see a single redeeming thing about the Trump presidency during this first year?
Very little. The strong economy obviously is a big plus, but I don't really think President Trump can take much credit for it. And if the economy is doing so well, why on earth do we need a big tax cut for the billionaire class? I don't see much, and you know, I really feel in the past year that as President, Donald Trump has shown himself completely unsuitable to the job. And I disagree with the idea in your piece that things haven't changed very much, because he pulled out of the Paris Treaty on the environment. It's been a disaster. He named a new U.S. Supreme Court justice, but one who is extremely right-wing. But
that's also an area where the Congressional Republican Caucus, that was also one which the Republican Congress was very keen to work with him on, whereas in other areas where they don't wish to cooperate or where they can't agree an answer, like healthcare, he hasn't achieved change.
Thank goodness healthcare wasn't repealed, although through other means they've tried to take away some of the major provisions of the Obama healthcare law.
All right.
And you know, I think that America's standing in the world has been hurt during the past year.
How would you measure that? But by what index would you measure that hurt to America's standing?
Well, I mentioned a minute ago the Paris Accords, pulling out of that. America had been, you know, one of the leaders in the world towards reducing green gases, and now it's not. And
okay.
You know, I think that he is undependable, and people are scared to death about what's happening in North Korea right now.
Matthew Oberle, I do want to ask you about North Korea, but before we go on to that, surely, clearly you like the man, you think he's achieving something, but surely you would concede he's a uniquely divisive and polarizing figure.
I would say he's a unique figure. I wouldn't call him a deeply polarizing figure. I mean, if we want to really get down to measurable results, the president has taken basically war to the regulatory burden that stops small businesses and entrepreneurs from succeeding. And he's put money back into the middle class, you know, into their pockets, be it $500, $200, or thousands of dollars. We'd want to talk about health care. People who don't, you know, who are healthy, who might not need health care, are going to have that penalty put back in their pockets. And I truly believe that the American way is to allow the people to decide if you know, they want to have health care or not. I wouldn't call him a polarizing figure. I think a lot of where we see the polarization coming from is the media. You've got media on the left and media on the right, and you know, I truly believe that I can't agree that he's a polarizing.
Right, Matthew, just on the North
figure.
Korea point that Jill Abramson made. I mean, we were just looking at some CBS polling before we came on air, saying 59% of Americans disapprove of the way he's dealing with that issue. It's a thing that scares a lot of people, including Republicans, isn't it? The language he's used on North Korea.
I hate to say it, but when the leader, the dictator of North Korea can just lob missiles over a sovereign nation, you know, such as Japan, I truly think we need to hammer down some tough language and remind this guy that that's not allowable on the global stage. And I think his rhetoric is strong.
Can you afford to do that kind of tough talking with two nuclear-armed states facing off against one another, where misperception could lead to disaster?
The perception could lead to disaster is a vague statement. You know, I think we have to remind him, and frankly, we have to remind other dictators that this behavior is not allowable, and we will do what's needed to make sure that not only America's safe, but that, you know, our citizens, when they go abroad, that they're safe as well. I think he's using tough language is how I would describe it.
Thank you. I want to bring in Wendy Osefo from Washington. I mean, looking at this from a Democrat supporters basis as you do, how are you going to win in the midterms coming up this year? Wouldn't you expect the Democratic Party to be showing more strongly in the polls, given how bad the president's approval rating is? What's missing there in their campaign?
Well, the Democratic Party is showing strongly in the polls because the president has actually had a very dreadful year. He's endorsed a child molester in Alabama. He's waged a war against the free press. He has dilapidated his own political party. He's given a thumbs up to white supremacists, and he continues to put a hole in our democracy. You know, it's very, very difficult to do a good job. It's easy to tear something apart, and our president has chosen the latter, and that's the issue. When it comes to the midterms, the Democrats are going to forge ahead. If we look at the special elections that have happened thus far, in Virginia, the Democrats won. In Alabama, the Democrats won. These are ruby red states that were not supposed to be won at all by the Democrats. So if the special elections are any indication of the tidal wave that is coming for the Republican Party, then I will say that the midterms are going to be something in which you will see a big turn. And there's lots of Republican seats that are up for re-election. So if they want to keep their seats, I would suggest that they tell their party president to put a button on it and stop with the Twitter and move forward with policy.
Wendy, you've pointed to one or two areas of the country where the Democrats are showing well in special elections, and clearly they were pretty hammered back in the last nationwide election. But what's missing at the national level? I mean, where is the leadership? There is no one clearly embodying the Democratic challenge to the president at the national level.
We have leadership. What you're going to see here in 2020 is the same thing in which we saw in 2016. You're going to see a wave of Democrats come up and say that they want to, you know, invigorate the nation by running. But what's going to happen, and I'm going to call this ahead of time, is anyone who decides that they are going to lead the Democratic Party has to embody more than just a movement. They have to ignite people. They have to put that same hope, that same feeling of change, similar to that of Barack Obama. What we have seen with Donald Trump here is he has been highly divisive. He has a lot of rhetoric that just really tears up our country. So whoever comes behind him and who's going to win this election is going to be someone who brings us together and forges forth a message of unity and a message of hope. That's what we need right now in a leader.
Matthew Oberle, can I just ask you, I mean, a lot of Republicans one speaks to on the Hill imply that if the party takes a beating in the midterms, it'll sort of be over in terms of the Trump presidency, that it'll be hobbled from that point onwards. How concerned are you by that possibility?
You know, you want to talk about the government shutting down. Americans need 9 Democrats. Americans, not President Trump, not Paul Ryan. America needs 9 congressmen, you know, to keep Democrats, to keep the government from shutting down. While, you know, the GOP holds a majority in Congress, we can't do it without Democrats. Americans can't do it without Democrats, and I think that's the real important point to make right now is we need to prevent this government shutdown, and the Republicans can't stop Chuck Schumer from shutting it down. We need Democrats to rise up and work for Americans and prevent the government from shutting down. And I think in 2018, we're gonna be able, as the Republican Party, to go forward and say, you know, the Democrats didn't rise up to prevent a government shutdown. The Democrats didn't rise up and enable those who are supposed to protect us to keep protecting us.
Jill Abramson, I mean, let's just come back to this issue we were discussing with Wendy about the leadership. Of course, you expect a front runner to emerge when the presidential nomination race gets underway in earnest. But are you concerned...
After the 2018 elections.
Indeed. But are you concerned that there don't seem to be the obvious national figures, national contenders pushing their way to the front, that there isn't that type of national opposition to President Trump right now?
I think that is a good point. And, you know, I'm not here as a partisan spokesman, so I'm not going to say it alarms me, but I would say, you know, people and Democrats and much of the country that's been so shocked and disappointed by President Trump, they're aching for some inspiration. They really are. And you're right. So far, there isn't a unifying Democratic candidate who's emerged to get people very excited. But there's still, you know, quite a bit of time.
Let's hope there's time for that excitement to build there. Jill Abramson, Matthew Oberle, Wendy Osefo, thank you all very much indeed for joining us.